South LA. After dark, corners whisper, hats speak louder than words, and one flag turns the whole map into a battlefield. From schoolyards to strip malls, the politics ain't just red versus blue. It's cards on the table. Deuces versus trays, respect on sight. Legends rise, rumors spark, and a single sentence can flip a parking lot into a crime scene. City Hall writes orders, feds build cases, podcasters chase clout, and the streets still keep score. This is a story of big names, bigger sets, and the kind of smoke that doesn't clear when the cameras cut. We're stepping into a world where loyalty pays in blood and power moves coast to coast. Join us as we follow the money, decode the beef, and map ROLLIN 60s versus everybody. The Crip story starts in Los Angeles in 1969, when Raymond Washington on the east side and Stanley Tookie Williams on the west side pulled two hard crews together. It was an alliance, not one command. Sets stayed autonomous, each with its own rules, names, and leaders. That freedom made hoods feel powerful, but it also planted beef. If a set felt disrespected, it moved. No permission. As the name spread across coastal Southern California, cliques popped up block by block. By 1978, there were around 45 Crip sets in LA, already touching PCP, marijuana, and amphetamines. Money and momentum ran hot, and no single voice could slow it. Then 1979 hit, and everything went darker. Historians point to an early Crip on Crip murder that January, when Andreani Jones from 107 Hoover got killed by someone from the underground Crips. Blood was in the street. In March, Tookie got arrested on 4 murders. In August, Washington was gunned down, even though he stood against Crip infighting. With those anchors gone, sets turned on sets and the code sharpened. Inside that storm, a West Side splinter from the bigger West Side Crips had already taken shape in Hyde Park around 1976, the ROLLIN 60s neighborhood Crips. They moved heavy in numbers and turf. People knew the look. Seattle Mariners S-caps or sometimes Chicago White Sox logos, graffiti staking corners. Their ground was never only 60th Street, think roughly 48th to 71st, an irregular piece locals feel by instinct. Western Ave sliced east and west-south central like a blade. Up the hill sat View Park, the so-called Black Beverly Hills. Big homes, clean lawns, boxed by tougher zones like Baldwin Village to the north, ROLLIN 40s and Van Ness brims to the east, and the 60s to the south. That rich on a hill next to War on the Flats picture shaped how people moved at night. Back when Tookie called shots, West Side subgroups needed his blessing, which is how the 60s got stamped in. Symbols mattered, and the Mariners S became a crown. After 1979, nobody waited for approvals. The 60s ballooned and carved inner lanes. Front hood around Crenshaw and Florence, Overhill Hills, Arlington, Brenhurst, Dime Block. Folks tossed big membership numbers. Even if the real count was lower, the 60s moved like the biggest West Side machine. Right below them, another power formed with Tookie's early nod, the 8-tray gangster Crips. Named off 83rd Street, they held turf from Gage to 98th. Texas Rangers caps, sometimes Longhorns, marked their style. Like the 60s, they split into sublanes. North Side, Far West Side, back West Side, South Side. On paper, it was 2 large Crip sets staking turf. On pavement, 2 trains on the same track. The spark people still argue about dropped in 1979. The streets talk about a beef over a girl. An insider says he knew the people, and that drama knocked the first domino. Then March 8th, 1979, Tyrone Hardiman, Big Rick's brother, got killed. The shooter was not 8-tray. He was 90 gangster Crips. Pressure hit the 8 trays to hand that shooter over. They refused, saying they weren't involved. That refusal, tied to the killing, poured gas on the flame. Respect codes cut deep. From there, ROLLIN 60s and 8 trays were at each other's necks. One hit turned into a long fuse. Bodies stacked into the double digits, and innocent bystanders got caught. The worst was in the 1980s, when LA's homicide rate showed how hot summers ran. The map changed. Once 60s versus 8 trays erupted, the city sorted into cards. Hoods lined up, Deuces 2X or Trays 3X. Deuces meant the neighborhood alliance. Trays meant gangster Crips with 8-tray energy behind it. Most neighborhood Crips wore the NHC name, but not all. Raymond Ave Crips, Hard Time Hustler Crips, Gear Gang Crips, and West Bloods D Crips still fell under 2X without the tag. Menlo even switched lanes, moving from Menlo Gangster Crips to Menlo Neighborhood Crips after clashes with 8 trays and allies. Picking wrong in the wrong place could get you pressed on sight. By the mid-1980s, more than 24 neighborhood Crip sets were active across South LA. It wasn't just alleys and party spots. The split lived in schools, bus stops, burger stands, At Crenshaw High, our 60s kids often clash with Van Ness gangsters to the north. VNG is blood, but campus numbers let the 60s dominate outside their exact turf lines. It shows how the 2X versus 3X card didn't stay on walls. It rode on bell schedules and after-school routes. By 1980, the city sat in a wild reality. Blue versus red plus blue versus blue. The 60s versus 83 gangster Crips rivalry had been locked in since 1979. Old ties snapped too. East Coast Crips and Hoover Crips broke their early alliance after Washington's death. In that climate even, a truce felt risky. Any handshake could be read as weak by a young gun with a point to prove. Zoom out and you see Tookie's early unity kept things under one umbrella for a while. Time brought new faces, egos, and corners. Subgroups multiplied. The ROLLIN 60s took Hyde Park and pushed wide, right next to View Park's mansions, while dealing with ROLLIN 40s and Van Ness brims to the east and rivals down south. The 8 trays rose beneath them and drew their line from Gage to 98th. Both had Tookie's nod at first, but after 1979, nobody needed permission, and both ran heavy. Everyone agrees. After the March 8th killing and the refusal to hand over the 90 gangster shooter, the split turned permanent. Deuces stacked with ROLLIN 60s and other NHCs, plus 2X hoods like Raymond Ave. Trays rode with 8 trays and GC allies, like 53 Avalon gangster Crips and 43 gangster Crips. A hat, a logo, a hand sign could turn a gas stop into a check and a check into a fight. The 1980s and early 1990s showed the damage in real time. LA homicide was sky high. The war didn't respect walls, it reached lockups too. In 1984, ROLLIN 60s member Taekwon Lil Fee Cox stabbed Stanley Tookie Williams on a San Quentin mini yard. Symbolic weight. The streets war now touched prison yards. From 1980 to 1995, ROLLIN 60s versus 8 Tray gangster Crips was the most intense Crip on Crip conflict in the county. That's the template when people say 60s versus everybody. The 60s flag was huge and drew hate from many lanes, while the 8 Trays feud sat in the center like a drumbeat. That era brought other stains and shocks. 2 men tied to the 60s got grabbed for the 1984 murders of 4 people from NFL player Kermit Alexander's family. Police said it was a wrong address hit. One bad read, a family wiped out, the city locked on the set's name, rivals talking reckless, the block feeling the weight. Then 1988 pulled the fight into Westwood. Darrell DeWitt Collins from the 60s aimed at a Mansfield gangster Crip target and hit an innocent woman, Karen Toshima. The city snapped awake. Patrol cars stacked, rewards popped, news cameras swarmed, council voices called out the double standard. South LA bodies got ignored, but one life in Westwood flipped policy in a night. Folks in the hood already knew shootings were daily. Rich streets panicked, pressure on the 60s spiked, and the funeral showed how big and deadly the world had grown. From then on, the 60s name sat in a brighter spotlight. Every move got heavier. Through the 1990s, the neighborhood blueprint spread wider. Over 30 subsets rocked the 2X lane. The map pushed past LA and across the country. Crews like ROLLIN 40s, ROLLIN 50s, ROLLIN 60s, ROLLIN 80s, West Coast, and ROLLIN 90s stood up across the 40s to hundreds. Other 2X hoods, like East Coast neighborhood Crips and Raymond Ave Crips, held their own. Neighborhood became a movement, not just a moniker. Funerals showed the scale. In 1992, Crips kingpin Keith Stone Thomas was killed. Around 400 people pulled up, cops included. Faces from every lane saw the bodies, the flags, the costs. Youth worker Chilton Alphonse said it plain. Once upon a time, the ROLLIN 60s were a family. Now, I think a lot of these youngsters are beginning to question, is it really worth it? That question hung while the set kept growing. Even when a crew gets bigger, the ground under it can turn hollow. By decades in, the pattern was cemented. The ROLLIN 60s stood as the West Side's loudest 2X banner. 8 Tray gangster Crips held the 3X lane below them. Everyone else arranged around those poles. Allies, rivals, or just folks trying to walk a block without being pressed for a brim, a letter, a logo. The city's memory kept the markers. The January 1979 Crip on Crip hit, the March arrest, the August murder of Washington, the March 8th Hardeman killing, the 1984 San Quentin stabbing, the 1984 Wrong Address massacre, tied to 2 men linked with the 60s, the 1988 Westwood crossfire that killed Karen Toshima. Those moments became the spine of the story people tell to explain 60s versus everybody, how a set that big turns into a flag, how flags attract enemies, and how a refusal tied to a murder redrew a whole city into deuces and trays. Track it straight and you see the shift. Alliance to fracture, 2 founders to many bosses, a handful of streets to dozens of sets, outside beef to Crip on Crip, leaders removed and autonomy on steroids, one Hyde Park breakout to a family of ROLLIN sets, a personal drama hardening into a fixed deuce versus tray divide, summer heat spilling into prison yards, local tragedies sparking citywide policy panic. Through it all, the Mariner's S sat like a crown and a warning. Even a hat could start a check. Check could become a chase. That's the era. Born in '69, split in '79, echoing through the '80s and '90s as ROLLIN 60s versus everybody, with the 8-tray feud at the core, and the whole city forced to play its cards. A 13-year-old girl turns up in an alley. 3 names float through the block. Dayland Hicks, Lamar Armstrong, Trayvon Boyd. The girl's godfather, Marcus Lil Sonny Adams, is hurt and hot. He moves for 3 days, asking around, knocking on doors, following whispers. This isn't colors to him. This is family. He finds the trio sitting in a Cadillac on 47th and Western. He asks who they are. He asks if they did what he thinks they did. They don't duck. They brag. He tells them that's his goddaughter. They mock him and toss the line, "Do you want to be next?" He answers with gunfire. 3 ROLLIN 60s go down where they sit. One stumbles into Ford's liquor and dies. It's a 1-minute clip that rewires lives forever. On the street, they call it revenge. In the news, they call it 6 Deuce Brim versus ROLLIN 60s. The papers reduced it to colors. But when the sirens fade, the labels stick. It's written up as Brim on 60s, not Godfather for Goddaughter. That headline will matter in court. The case becomes People v. Marcus Dorwin Adams. A jury convicts him of the first-degree murders of Hicks, Armstrong, and Boyd, an attempted murder, and a carjacking. Special circumstance for multiple murders lands on the sheet. The jury returns death. Appeals go up. The Supreme Court of California affirms the judgment and the sentence. Right there on 47th, Louis Dyer stands by the car, chopping game with his homies from the 60s. He sees the shooter walk up. He knows him from CYA. But Dyer's a 46 neighborhood Crip, and there's a code. You talk, you're a snitch. So he tells the cops nothing that day, nothing the next. He calls a family member instead. Later, in a lineup, he still holds back. Jail is full of eyes. He's not trying to be a target. Inside the jail, Dyer gets walked to an office. The shooter's waiting. He shows Dyer a copy of Dyer's earlier statement. He tells Dyer not to say nothing. He says he can get Dyer moved if he stays quiet. He says he gave him a pass that day. Dyer hears the message under the message. He keeps his head down. Years later, when he is out and trying to live clean, he finally IDs him again, in a photo spread, in a live lineup, and in court. Xenia Meeks was by the hood of the car. She saw the face. Back then, she told the police she couldn't ID anyone. She was scared and trying to protect Dyer. Calls hit her family. Keep quiet. Time moves. She gets sober, becomes a Christian, and decides to do what she calls the right thing. In 2001, she points to the same man. Kipchoge Johnson is Brim, tight with 6 Deuce. He tells the jury what he heard after the hit. "This is what I did for the homies," the shooter says, tossing a newspaper on the floor. He brags he walked up, threw the neighborhood sign, got a sign back, then domed the 3 with 5 shots. Johnson explains why that detail matters in set culture. 5 to the head is status, and you don't fake a body. You get checked for that. Christopher Fennell is 6 Deuce too. In 1995, the shooter comes to buy a gun. He talks about that day. He says a 4th man ran. He shot at him, then shot the 3 in the car. Different room, same details. Later, both Johnson and Fennell testify under protection. The courtroom feels that pressure as much as the sidewalk did. Prosecutors tell the jury to expect fear, threats, and silence. That's normal in these cases. The defense calls it vouching. The High Court says the fear talk stands because it explains why witnesses stayed quiet, why lineups fail, why people flip years later. The jury also gets a consciousness of guilt instruction. Intimidate a witness, and the jury can treat that like smoke pointing to fire. The city is already hot. Deuces versus trays is years deep. Hoovers and Bloods sit on lines that bend every few blocks, and then the bodies start stacking in sequence. 3 weeks after the triple homicide, a crew rushes Pacific Marine Credit Union in Oceanside. Assistant manager Melissa Lopez feels a gun on her temple, fumbles the keys, vault pops, drawers get swept, and the take hits about 161 grand while co-worker Michael Logren gets pistol whipped and robbed. Next case turns the calendar fast to Santa Monica. Security guard Luis Hernandez is on rounds when a car rolls up. The front passenger flashes a 9 and says, "Don't move." Shots crack as Hernandez runs. He gets hit, stumbles, gets up, gets hit again, and drags himself through the credit union door, while witness Jasmine Green watches the shooter step out. Fire, jump back in, and minutes later, 6 blocks away, carjacks hit Socorro Navarro as a neighbor gets a gun waved in his face and the yellow Cadillac peels off with her ride. Years pass, and in 1999, Santa Monica detectives rework the file. Shells and fragments from that scene match a gun seized on the shooter back in 1994. A witness picks him in photos, then live, then again in court, and when pressed, the shooter names a former friend to take the weight before admitting he bought the very gun that fired those rounds. 2 weeks out on parole, he steps to George Minor in a front yard. "Are you Ray Ray?" Minor says no. The shooter says, "You Ray Ray," and claims East Coast, then opens up with another man. Minor takes hits in the arm and leg. Deputies chase a white Cadillac and pull 2 men out, 2 pistols tucked in the car. Gunshot residue on both his hands. Ballistics match shell to steel. After subpoenas go out, the phone rings at Minor's house. Don't come to court. His wife gets more calls, names of schools and jobs thrown out like a threat. She shows up anyway, then flees when she sees him behind glass. Later, she points to him in the box. Parole in July. In August, 4 men enter Vandenberg Federal Credit Union in Lompoc. One pretends to fill a slip. The shooter jumps the counter with a shotgun and screams, "Get down." He puts the barrel in Moira Philly's back and shoves her toward the manager's office. 2 shots pop by the entrance. A woman named Christine Orsuch had opened the front door for a man on crutches. A masked gunman shoots the man in the leg, then calls her back. A second shot drops Christine. Someone snatches a backpack off her as she lies there. Her 11-year-old son hears the shots and his mom scream his name. He runs to a side door and is held back while she fades on the sidewalk. The take is just over $11,000, but the cost is a family torn open. Before the Lompoc hit, the shooter and a partner talk in Sabrina Johnson's apartment about the bank job. They need cars. They want big money. A friend warns them if someone dies, they'll both wear it. The shooter says he doesn't care. After the case breaks, investigators find a note that says, "Braceau's a rat. Braceau and Marlowe need to die." Signed with his gang name. Braceau is Sabrina. The word rat sits in the middle like a crosshair. Locked up for the Lompoc case, he escapes the Santa Barbara County jail yard with 2 others. They run down the hill, surround a woman named Matilda Ulrich, yank her from her car, and burn rubber. Patrol cars get behind them. A spike strip ends the ride. All 3 go back in cuffs. The paperwork keeps stacking. The custody log reads like a riot calendar. 1994 at Avino, he kicks a blood from a rival set and later breaks the man's jaw. 1997 in county, he challenges a deputy to step in the cell and throw hands. 1998 in a courthouse cage, he snaps a hanger and sharpens it on concrete. 2000 in county, he threatens deputies over meds. 2001, he slides a cartoon to a deputy showing the deputy beaten and dead. Another search finds a rolled newspaper club wrapped in sheet. The same month, he swings a waist chain and promises to tear the place apart. Weeks later, he gasses deputies through the tray slot with a white liquid and curses them out. 2002, he writes a note. "I give you my word as a man that I will slice or stab this guy the first chance I get." He says he will gas an officer if they slip. That summer, he reaches through bars and slices an inmate trustee across the neck, a 2.5-inch cut that bleeds heavy. 2003, he pops out and attacks another inmate, Richard Aguirre, in a shower of blood. Deputies say the wounds look like a shank was working. He later says he wishes he had finished the job. Monitored mail catches him bragging again. He writes about robbing a credit union. He says he cut a white boy with a razor while locked up. He says he carved a Mexican in January 2003. Keeps that tough talk the same way he kept the cap down on the street. Consistent. The prosecutor warns the jury not to give a freebie on the third murder or the other violent acts. The defense says that word is wrong. The high court says the state can argue weight as long as the jury is told how to weigh. The jury gets instructions on aggravation and mitigation. They get told that attorney talk is in evidence. They get told they decide based on what they saw and heard, not swagger at the podium. The defense brings out family and experts. They talk about a rough house, beatings, and chaos. They point to attention issues and learning problems. They show tests that say there's brain dysfunction in areas tied to impulse control. They mention a gene that can boost risk when mixed with abuse. They say OGs from his lane got wiped early, and he grew up idolizing a violent brother. It's a different type of map. Not corners and alleys, but nerves and scars. The jury hears it all. The law tells them they can give mercy where they find it. Then they go back to the facts and make their call. On appeal, the Supreme Court goes line by line. Witness fear was fair to explain credibility. The intimidation meeting in jail let the jury consider consciousness of guilt. The freebie talk did not flip the law. Mitigation came in full, but the weight stayed with the murders and the trail of violence. The judgment and the death sentence are affirmed. The file closes on that case, but the street story keeps moving. From an alley rumor to a Cadillac on 47th to a courthouse years later, This slice of the ROLLIN 60s versus everybody era shows how fast a personal rage becomes a headline and how that headline becomes a case number. Every page adds weight to the same pattern, and the map we drew at the start still matters because the next chapters bring the city cards right back into the frame. In 2003, the city attorney hit the ROLLIN 60s with a gang injunction naming 31 men, and people said it was off, listing guys without police contact in 14 years. In 2008, a GQ story about a 60s informant drew smoke as fabricated, adding more heat and more doubt. By 2017, Los Angeles was barred from enforcing most injunction orders, and in 2018, Chief Judge Virginia A. Phillips ruled many targets were denied due process. Even with the paperwork fading, the street pressure stayed the same. Van Ness gangsters to the north all Hoovers like 83 and 74, and gangster Crips riding with 8 trays like 53 Avalon and 43. Meanwhile, a different chapter was building across the country. In 2003, 3 hardcore Crips, Raphael Osborne, Gusto, Daquaine Chambers, Dulu, and Johnny Green, J. Locke, brought the ROLLIN 60s from the West Coast to Long Island. Roosevelt became home base, but the reach was national, with monthly calls to a California big homie for orders. By 2004, leadership on both sides locked into weekly shootouts with the Roosevelt Bloods, and a news outlet tagged ROLLIN 60s as the largest black criminal street gang in Los Angeles. Size brought clout, but it also brought heat. The powder keg blew in December 2010 when Crip Eric Smith shot and killed Bloods leader James McClintock, and within 2 weeks, there were close to 40 shootings, then 20 to 30 a month through 2014. The FBI's Long Island Gang Task Force, Nassau County PD, and the U.S. Attorney have been narrowing in since 2007, but the real slide started in 2014 when the number 2 flipped and 9 more cooperated, handing over the hierarchy and money routes to build a big RICO. About 20 members were arrested that year, and by 2018, 8 more were convicted. The set was dismantled. Shootings tied to them fell by more than 70%, and a town that saw weekly smoke went 109 days without a single shooting. By the time Roosevelt cooled in 2018, Louisiana was on the clock again, and the Marathon block was about to face his darkest day. Ermias Joseph Ascadome grew up bouncing between his mom's and grandma's homes inside ROLLIN 60s territory in the Crenshaw district. School was Alexander Hamilton High at first, but the streets pulled louder. By 14, he left home and got jumped in with the ROLLIN 60s. From that day, he was hood-tied for real, and every move after had that blue shadow on it. Around 17, he linked with Buttervision, a creative crew, and the nickname stuck, Nipsey Hussle, a flip on Nipsey Russell, born out of how hard he worked. He was already shining shoes at 11 for $2.50 a pair, chasing 100 a day just to get fly for school. That grind turned into burning CDs and selling mixtapes out the trunk at Slauson and Crenshaw. The lane was small, the focus was big. At 19, his pops took Nipsey and Black Sam to Eritrea for 3 months. He came back different, talking entrepreneurship and community plays. The mission got bigger than rap, but he never fronted like he wasn't from the set. He stayed R60s, which meant every outside move could bring inside smoke. He dropped Slauson Boy Volume 1 in 2005. It made local noise, got him in rooms with Cinematic and Epic, but the come-up felt slow. He stamped the motto that would define him. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Step by step, tape by tape, corner by corner. Even while he pivoted into business, his card stayed the same. That meant constant risk from rivals and oppositions around the city map. 8 trays, Van Ness, Inglewood family, Harvard Park, Grape Street, Hoovers, and later ROLLIN 20s. Studio sessions, video shoots, even store runs had to be watched. One wrong gas station could be a green light. After he left Epic, he built All Money In and pushed his own drops. The Marathon in 2010, the Marathon continues in 2011, Crenshaw in 2013, Mailbox Money in 2014. He tested game by selling high-priced physical copies even while the music was free online. He signed homies like Jay Stone, Pac-Man the Gunman, BH, Cobby Supreme, Cuzzy Capone, and Killer Twan. The brand became a flag on its own. June 17, 2017, he opened the Marathon clothing at Slauson and Crenshaw with Carlos, Karen Civil, and Black Sam. It was a smart store with an app built by Idris Sandhu that unlocked exclusive content. In 2018, he partnered with investor David Gross and bought the small shopping center where the store sat. He said he wanted jobs and opportunity in Hyde Park. He lined up equity where he once lined up fades. He helped start Vector 90, a co-working space to put STEM in reach for kids from the same blocks. He had also put 6 figures into Marathon Agency with Steve Carless and Karen Civil back in 2013 to build a talent brand. The theme stayed the same: build, teach, flip the corner into a campus. He spoke to students, sat on panels, and said he wanted solutions and inspiration for young black men like him. He denounced gun violence even while keeping it honest about gang life. He would work with blood-affiliated artists to show a different path on camera. Behind the scenes, he was helping shape Destination Crenshaw and had planned to meet LAPD with Rock Nation on April 1st about ways to slow the shootings. It was a Sunday at Slauson and Crenshaw. Friends and family and fans posted up at the Marathon lot when Eric Holder, a ROLLIN 60s homie like Nip, walked up on him and tried to tap in, and the word in the air was paperwork. So Nipsey kept it street and respectful but firm and said, "I can't be around you, bro." And Holder fell back to his girlfriend's car, asked her to spin the block. She refused, and he still walked back on foot and opened fire with 2 handguns in the middle of the lot, hitting Nip multiple times and even kicking him in the head before peeling. And 2 other men standing there took rounds too. And by 3:55 p.m., the hospital called it. He was gone at 33. And the tape was so clear that everybody in the city knew who did it the minute the clip hit. But LAPD still ran their play the right way, moving quiet for 2 days until April 2nd, 2019, when they grabbed Holder in Bellflower and flipped the woman he'd been with from date to unwitting driver. And 2 days after the arrest, the stack of charges landed in black and white. 1 count of murder for Nipsey Hussle, 2 counts of attempted murder for the other men who got hit, 2 counts of assault with a firearm tied to that same burst, and possession of a gun by a felon. And while the streets called it a layup, court is where stories get timed and tested line by line. So the city held its breath and the love wave hit like a tide, some real and some performative. But the impact was bigger than music because Neighborhood Nip wasn't just a rapper, he was the landlord and the boss who had poured almost $2.5 million into that same lot, hired locals, opened doors, showed ownership on the block he rapped about, and within days his family in the city built a memorial that turned into history. But the Staples Center opened on April 11th for a free ticket homegoing, and former President Barack Obama sent words that cut through the noise. While most people saw gangs, bullets, and despair, Nipsey saw potential. And after the service, a 25.5-mile procession rolled through South Central and Watts, the Nation of Islam handling security in a way the community respected. Crowds thick along the route like they knew him since grade school, and the air changed just enough to notice because gang leaders read the moment and moved on it. So crews from LA and Compton marched together at a memorial and later sat down in Summits. And what came out wasn't a full truce, but a real ceasefire with a simple code: stay off each other's turf and stop shooting at people. And inside that shift, the camera caught something you hadn't seen in 40 years. Some 8 trays and some 60s in the same frame. Not everybody, but enough to feel the city blink. And yet the case still had to run its course because grief doesn't erase paperwork. So by June 2022, the trial finally kicked. Holder pled not guilty, and his lawyer tried to drop it to manslaughter with a heat of passion story, said the paperwork line in ROLLIN 60s turf in front of homies triggered him and made him panic, not plan. But the video had its own voice and showed steps too clean to ignore. Deputy District Attorney John McKinney kept it simple for the jury, calling out jealousy too, since Holder recorded as Fly Mac, while Nip's victory lap got Grammy love, then laying down the law in one punch. He thought about it and he did it. That's all premeditated means. You don't need weeks of plotting. Just leave, decide, return, and shoot. And the state put pain on the record with last words that still echo. As prosecutors said, Nip told his killer, "You got me," while bystander Shermy Villanueva told the court he heard, "He shot me. He shot me." And those aren't movie lines, that's concrete talking. And the 2 other victims stayed part of the truth too, because Villanueva survived and Kerry Lathan survived. But as of April 2019, Lathan was still in a wheelchair with a bullet lodged in his spine, proof the blast bent more than one life. And then Herman Cowboy Douglas, Nip's close friend and a key witness, stood up inside that courtroom and cut through old myth with new rules, saying this idea that snitching gets you ended on sight is stuck in the 80s. Nowadays, there's so many snitches walking around. That's a myth. You could walk out a gang right now. And he even pointed at himself, saying testifying would be called snitching, and he wasn't worried, which told the jury the 2022 street is not 1988, and the defense still pushed another lane and asked the judge to weigh mental health, reading a letter from Holder's father about a diagnosis of auditory schizophrenia at 19, voices paranoia, a manic crash 3 weeks before the shooting where he threw a heavy weight through a window because he feared he would be murdered, then showing the photo of staples in Holder's head from a razor attack inside jail to argue danger behind the wall, asking for 28 to life because prison would be brutal and short for the man who killed a figure like Nip. And the judge took the psychologist's report but blocked live testimony and listened to both sides. And when the jury came back on July 6, 2022, they stamped it. Guilty of first-degree murder for Nipsey Hussle and 2 counts of attempted voluntary manslaughter for the shots that hit the other 2 men. And the clock rolled on. And on February 22, 2023, the sentence landed like steel. Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge H. Clay Jackie set 25 years to life for murder, another 25 to life for using a gun, plus 10 more for the assaults on the bystanders. A stack that adds to at least 60 years before parole is a thought, and the room cracked long enough for Cowboy to sing "Hit the Road, Jack" before deputies tossed him out. And that tiny laugh was just pain trying to stand up. And while the years got set, the neighborhood felt the hole in cash and hope. But even with Nip gone, his plans didn't die. His brother Samuel Askedome took over as the permanent administrator of his estate. Destination Crenshaw kept moving forward with the branding Nip helped shape, and City Voices said they would still meet with his team about the violence prevention talk he scheduled for April 1st, the day after he was killed, and that meeting became a promise to pick up the work he mapped out. Then the calendar flipped to another loss tied to the same blue world, when on March 31st, 2021, exactly 2 years after the Marathon lot shooting, Danaeus Delmon, Shady Blue 4, Nicole's 24, a ROLLIN 60s homie, known from Keys to the City, got shot driving a white sedan near 110E, Palmdale Blythe Vida up in Palmdale, almost an hour north of LA, and the news hit fast with 1090 Jake posting quick, the Hoovers taunting on Instagram, and a Hoover rapper named Five chasing Clout off diss tracks, even dissing Mac, talking big on IG Lives and sitting down with no jumper while commenters clowned him for a tongue ring. And then on November 19, 2021, Five got arrested in connection with that March 31st hit, and the same people who joked online had to swallow it when the cuffs closed because they look silly now. And the through line in all these chapters is the same tension that makes this saga so heavy. ROLLIN 60s versus everybody doesn't always mean a rival set, because sometimes the deepest wounds come from inside the car. This is what it looks like when a legend from the ROLLIN 60s tries to turn the set into a blueprint, and a homie from the same set drops him in daylight. And the city learns again that the camera might catch everything, but it can't bring him back. In New Jersey, the ROLLIN 60s were not just a loose squad. From 2015 through September 22nd, 2022, feds say the set had moved like an enterprise, mixing violence with dope sales and fraud plays across the District of New Jersey and beyond. Members and associates lined up ranks, touched drugs, hit licks, and kept the name hot. The stage was set for RICO, and the clock was ticking toward bodies and indictments that would pull the whole story into federal court. Bird, known as Bands or G-Bands, was 22 but already plugged in. Back in March 2019, he worked with other ROLLIN 60s to kill a rival, who was fatally shot on March 20th in Irvington. That trigger pull became a pillar in the racketeering file. One body can reshape a case. Here it turned conspiracy language into life and death proof, and it marked a line the feds could hammer in front of a judge. The pattern continued. On June 20th, 2020, Bird and at least one other member or associate robbed a victim at gunpoint in Newark. It was simple street math. Keep pressure, take what you want, brand it with the set. For agents, it was more tape for the real. Another act under the enterprise umbrella, and one more reason to call the big task forces in tight. By late 2022, the timeline for the Jersey conspiracy hits its end date. Investigators had their span, their paper, their overt acts. With the frame set, prosecutors could lock each move to the RICO count. The score now moved from the block to the docket, and every alias got tied to a role. In Newark Federal Court, Trey Bird pleaded to RICO conspiracy and stood in front of Judge Susan D. Wigginton. The sentence came down at 144 months, 12 years, plus 5 years of supervised release. That number reflects the body in Irvington and the Newark stick-up, and it tells younger homies what federal time looks like when the enterprise tag is on your name. The book did not close there because the same file had more names. While Jersey cases stacked, a different kind of play was happening in Los Angeles. Skip Townsend sat sworn enemies at the same brunch table, ROLLIN 60s, and Inglewood family bloods. He did not preach peace. He just let them eat. Breaking bread was the plan, and his nonprofit Second Call picked up a $286 tab to buy a little silence on the back end. From that day in February 2022 through June 9th, 2024, Townsend says there was not a single homicide between those two rivals. One meal did what years of funerals could not. The streets noticed, and they kept watching to see if that calm would hold. Back in Newark, the enterprise thread pulled another name, Nige Johnson, known as Guito, pleaded guilty to RICO conspiracy in front of Judge Wigginton. Prosecutors say from 2015 through September 22, 2022, he moved with the same ROLLIN 60s enterprise, conspiring to distribute controlled substances and running bank fraud with members and associates. The max is 20 years and up to a $250,000 fine. Sentencing is set for December 3, 2024. The message felt familiar. The enterprise might change faces, but the statute stays the same. These wins did not come from one badge. DEA, IRSCI, ATF, U.S. Marshals, New Jersey State Police, plus a long list of local departments from Irvington to Newark to Elizabeth pushed together. North Carolina SBI's Fugitive Task Force, with FBI inside, helped close loops. The umbrella was OCDETF, a prosecutor-led, intel-driven machine designed to identify, disrupt, and dismantle high-level organizations. When RICO lands, it is because every report, every lab result, every arrest warrant lined up on the same track. When feds lock a set, violence drops and blocks breathe. We saw that in Long Island when a different 60s set got dismantled and shootings fell hard. In LA, Townsend aimed for the same outcome from another angle. Sit 60s and IFGB together and let them remember each other's faces. A quiet meal in a beach city can keep a mother from picking a casket in the Crenshaw district. In 2024, Byrd caught 12 years, and Johnson admitted his role with sentencing ahead. The Justice Department hits the yard with a federal complaint naming a longtime ROLLIN 60s figurehead as the lead of a mafia-like setup the papers call the Big U Enterprise. The target is Eugene Henley Jr., 58, known on the set as Big U, a Hyde Park OG who rose back in the 80s. Feds say from 2010 on, his crew ran extortion, human trafficking, fraud, illegal gambling, and even tied in the 2021 desert murder of an aspiring rapper signed to his unique music label. It is not just street muscle either. Agents say the enterprise used famed tools like podcasts, documentaries, interviews, and the OG aura to scare, to move, to collect. 18 ROLLIN 60s members and associates are charged across drug trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, and gun counts, with 10 scooped in 24 hours, 4 already locked, and 5 at large. Henley is listed as a fugitive, and the FBI says the hunt is on. But the next day brings a twist. In the complaint affidavit, the feds lay out a grim story. January 2021, Unique Music pays for a young artist known in the paperwork as RW to hit a Grammy producer's Las Vegas studio. The sessions go sideways over rate and respect. A defamatory track about Big U pops up. Prosecutors say Henley and his partner roll to Vegas, confront the artist, and drive him toward North Las Vegas. The allegation is cold-blooded, a headshot in the car, body dragged off I-15 and dumped in the desert ditch. Back at the studio, security footage is allegedly pulled, and witnesses are allegedly told to keep quiet. On the street, that sounds like mob play. In court, that sounds like the heart of a RICO story: power, control, and fear. The feds do not stop at the body. They say Unique Music claimed a 2019 profit on a pandemic relief application when the book showed a loss, a move that would make the loan ineligible. Then comes the nonprofit angle. Developing Options, Henley's Hyde Park charity that promotes choices beyond gangs, is painted as a shield and a pipeline. Prosecutors say celebrity and corporate donations meant for kids and programs got embezzled into a personal bank account. They note Developing Options pulled public money through the city's grid pipeline, which links to federal funds. IRSCI steps up in the release with the message, if you skim taxpayer dollars or donor money under a false flag, we will count every penny. AP drops an update. After a short search, the FBI says they have Henley in custody, along with another defendant who was also listed as a fugitive. The headline is loud. A longtime LA gang leader and entertainment face now booked behind federal glass. The pitch from prosecutors is straight. They want the leadership, they want the structure, and they want every lane: drugs, guns, fraud, sex trafficking, under one racketeering umbrella. The next day, cameras catch a new angle. Before surrendering, Henley posts videos saying he is innocent and says this is the price of trying to help the community while being black. In court, AP notes he will stay in custody until a March 31st detention hearing, with arraignment set for April 8th. The government restates the RICO posture. If convicted on the RICO, they say he faces a statutory max of life in federal prison. The message to the streets is clear, but the paperwork file just got heavier. 1 week later, a grand jury returns a 43-count stack that turns the complaint into a full scoreboard. Henley is charged with RICO conspiracy, Hobbs Act robbery, and extortion conspiracies. A standalone Hobbs Act robbery, 9 attempted extortions, 5 completed extortions, Mann Act transportation tied to prostitution, 15 wire fraud counts, 5 theft of federal funds counts, bank fraud, tax evasion, and 2 willful failure to file counts. Co-defendants include Sylvester V. Robinson and Mark Bearclaw Martin, plus Termaine Loose Cannon Williams, Armani Manny Afalije, and others. Prosecutors say from 2010 to March 2025, the Big U enterprise flexed violence and influence and amplified its presence through social media and content. They also say when agents started arrests on March 19th, Henley cut his phones and fled, then posted on an Instagram account about profiling and told people not to associate with co-defendants or opponents. He later surrendered without the phones. In Fed court, those details do not look like legend. They read like overt acts. The indictment spells out the statutory maximums. RICO conspiracy can mean up to 20 years. Bank fraud can mean up to 30. Hobbs Act conspiracies and the extortion counts can hit 20. Wire fraud can hit 20. Mann Act up to 10. The theft of federal funds up to 10. Tax evasion up to 5. And willful failure to file up to 1 year. Stack those on a case with a murder folded into the racketeering story, and the exposure looks like a life bid even before enhancements get argued. It is the kind of sheet that tells younger homies what the feds do when they say enterprise. The press lines list names from every lane: FBI's Los Angeles Metropolitan Task Force on Violent Gangs, IRS CI, DOJ OIG, LAPD, and North Las Vegas PD. The language echoes earlier OCDTF style moves we saw in Jersey and Long Island cases. Prosecutor-led, intel-driven, multi-agency. The LAPD, quote, salutes the joint work and calls the complaints and indictments a major step forward for neighborhoods that have carried too many candles and too many obits. On paper, this is how you hit a set's leadership structure without chasing one body at a time. A loud piece of the case is the branding. Prosecutors say the Big U enterprise used the OG title, interviews, docs, podcasts, and social media to build clout and create fear. In the hood, clout is currency. In Fed court, clout can be motive, method, and means. When intimidation travels through a camera lens, as well as a corner, the wire fraud and extortion counts suddenly have reels and reposts to point at. By late 2025, Louisiana media clocks a different storm. Podcasters and YouTubers pumping a combustible mix of news and speculation about active gang beefs. A surveillance clip from a Manchester and Figueroa liquor store shootout goes viral. Men stepping toward a woman, others sliding into frame, then a hail of bullets, bodies scrambling, one left on the pavement. The internet spins, pages chase views, and young hitters watch the clout numbers jump. For sets already at war, 8 Trays, Hoovers, Inglewood families, and the rest of the map, this new broadcast lane can pour gas on old sparks. For prosecutors, it is also a record. For the block, it is a reminder that a lens can get you famous and get you followed the same day. Put the pieces in order and you see the shift. The name that once waved across Mariners hats and Hyde Park corners now shows up in federal pressers, in courtroom calendars, and in viral clips that pull millions of watches. Old heads and young homies still speak the same code words: snitching, paperwork, OG, but the battleground added algorithms. And between the courthouse and the comments section, the ROLLIN 60s versus everybody energy now has 2 front lines: the indictment table and the timeline, where clout can flip to evidence in one repost. The board is still set the same way: cards up, Deuces versus Trays, respect on contact. The names change, the headlines flip, and every few years a new case number tries to rewrite the script. Through it all, the flag stays loud. That tension is the real story. A set that became a symbol, a rivalry that became a map, and a city still trying to unlearn old rules while new ones write themselves in real time. We trace the echoes without giving the game away. Now the next move belongs to the players on both sides of the line. What happens when the clout chase online collides with old school green light rules on the block? If the cards reshuffle tomorrow, who calls it? The courts or the corners? When a truce buys time, who spins it and who reloads it? Can a flag stay powerful without keeping the body count high? And when the cameras leave, who really owns the story we just told? Let us know what you think in the comments box below. And if you liked how we presented you this video, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for more.